South African Deputy President Paul Mashatile says the world must never tire in supporting the Palestinian cause. Mashatile represented South Africa at the inaugural Saudi African summit in Riyadh. He also called for the cessation of hostilities in Gaza as the conflict intensifies. Mashatile sat down with SABC International Relations reporter Khayelihle Khumalo in the Saudi capital.
For a time, Deputy President, a very burning issue in this region will have to be what's happening in Gaza. And we saw a very clear communique about that current situation.
Well, indeed, firstly, let me say we came here to support the Saudi Africa Summit, which was an inaugural one, the first of its kind. So we thank the Saudis for that, because it means they are going to have a big focus on the continent. However, whilst we are here, we then urged all the leaders that we do need to say something about the situation in Palestine, particularly in Gaza. And that's why you'll see in the declaration we have now added the issue that this summit is in support with cessation of hostilities, the ceasefire, but particularly the call to support the innocent people who are being killed in Gaza. So the summit has now agreed. So if you read the declaration that has been adopted, you'll see that has now been covered, which South Africa insisted a lot that should be the case. I was particularly impressed that almost many African heads of states who spoke actually expressed their support to the people of Palestine.
We saw a very extraordinary decision where South Africa recalled its diplomat in Tel Aviv and Israel. So far, we're getting really what's happening on the ground.
Well, we have noticed that when we did that, there was still escalation. We keep checking. At the summit, we did call on all other leaders to do the same, because we do need to put pressure on Israel to stop the killings. So we'll continue monitoring the situation, and obviously we want the African leaders to take the steps that we have taken. I think it's important that as a continent we should speak with one voice against the killing of innocent people, and speak with one voice to ensure that the innocent people of Palestine do get the kind of support that they should get from the African continent.
Now, looking at how divisive this issue is, you're looking at what's happening within the UN Security Council. You know, it's highly polarized, but also most importantly, we do know that P5 countries, they tend to use the veto powers to push aside the decisions. What can countries like South Africa do in terms of influencing the issue of the dialogue, for example? We do know South Africa's experience when it comes to the dialogue.
In fact, to us, there is no other solution. We believe that conflict or disputes should be resolved through peaceful means. So we are going to continue to urge those who are key stakeholders in this to come to the negotiating table to discuss so that we can resolve this peacefully. We want to see the situation where the state of Israel and Palestine can live side by side in peace along the 1967 borders. So indeed, we do call for the two-state solution. The whole world is calling for that. The US, the Europe, Africa. We think that's the best way. Let there be peace, let people live side by side, and everyone must respect the sovereignty of other countries.
Now, looking at how divisive this issue is, you're looking at what's happening within the UN Security Council. You know, it's highly polarized, but also most importantly, we do know that P5 countries, they tend to use the veto powers to push aside the decisions. What can countries like South Africa do in terms of influencing the issue of the dialogue, for example? We do know South Africa's experience when it comes to the dialogue.
Well, of course, we did realize that it was not an easy matter, especially at the UN level. But I think we are in a situation where most leaders have now agreed that this cannot be allowed to go on. Many people killed, particularly children. I mean, as we speak now, probably when I looked at the news today, they are now saying more than 11,000 people who have been killed in Gaza. So that's why we use words like genocide. But of course, not everybody agrees sometimes on these kind of words. But where we are, everybody agrees that this must stop.
Now, looking at the very significance of Africa and Saudi summit, what does Africa want from this partnership? We know that Saudi Arabia is a very formidable economy, especially when it comes to energy.
Well, firstly, you recall that there was going to be the Arab-Africa summit and then the Saudi-Africa summit. So we actually were going to come to two summits. But the Arab-Africa summit has now been postponed. So Saudi Arabia then proceeded with the Saudi-Africa summit. Saudi Arabia is a very key, important player in the African continent, including in our country, South Africa. We know that the big companies from Saudi Arabia, like Aramco, are already investing in renewable energy in South Africa. And they are looking for more such investments. We are also urging South African companies to invest in Saudi Arabia. They have opened their doors. We have opened our doors to them. And many African countries have opened their doors to them. And I think that's why they convened the summit, because what Saudi is saying is that we want to come and be a key player in supporting development in Africa. So we welcome that, and that's why we are here. We have made it clear that this has our support. And there are other things that we've asked them to do that they have agreed to. For instance, the export of meat to Saudi, our beef, etc. They've now agreed to lift the ban, because remember there was a challenge because of the foot and mouth disease. But now Saudi has agreed that we can export meat products to them. They are looking for sheep, goats, etc. So there are a number of areas where we will interact with them in education, in agriculture, looking at the digital economy. Saudi is quite advanced in technology as well. So a lot is going to happen. We had our ministers advancing before the summit. Minister of Telco has been here for some time. Minister Patel was also here for trade and industry. And a lot of discussion have been held, and a lot of agreements have now been signed. So we're looking forward to a very viable relationship that we believe will be productive for both sides.
Energy is a very topical issue in South Africa, and we do know some of the challenges in terms of stabilizing the economy. What can we learn from Saudis in addressing this issue?
Yeah, in fact, they have agreed. In my engagement with them, you'll see in my speech, I did put that prominently, that the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is something that should be supported by them. In fact, that it will help them to look at that framework in terms of guiding their own investments in the continent. So we've put it quite prominently in the discussions, and we got a positive response, because Saudi is quite interested to being a key player in the continent. You'll recall that this summit itself was at the invitation of the custodian of the two mosques, the king himself, but also with the Crown Prince, who is the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, playing a very prominent role. He actually chaired the plenary himself at the beginning of the summit yesterday. So very positive, and as South Africa, we're looking forward to intensify our relationship with Saudi Arabia.
Lots of commonalities between South Africa and Saudi Arabia. These are members of G20, and the Saudis recently joined BRICS. What can they do in terms of just collaboration?
Obviously, relationships like this must be mutually beneficial. The Saudis are quite advanced also in desalination. They are advanced in energy. Remember, they are currently our number 2 biggest trade partner after the UAE. So already they are quite big in terms of trading with us. So we are looking at various elements of things that we can do together, because we also want to make sure that we can't bring down the level of deficit of trade to ensure that at least the balance is much better. And the way to do it is to export finished products rather than exporting raw material all the time. But yes, they are playing a key role, and we want to see that increasing from both sides.
And just before I let you go, Deputy President, what about the issue of peace and security? We do know of a role that Saudi Arabia has played. You look at the current situation in Sudan, they've been calling for cessation of hostilities. They've been calling for humanitarian aid. And we saw a number of rounds of peace talks being held in Jeddah.
Well, as you know, that today they are continuing with their own engagement, particularly with those countries. Saudi Arabia has been playing a very key role, particularly in areas where there's conflict. They are there supporting. And we did say in our engagement with them that we are very encouraged to see them taking that approach, because, as you know, South Africa itself is engaged in, efforts for peace. The president has asked me to look at the situation in South Sudan, and I have already visited there. But we are looking at ensuring peaceful resolution everywhere. You know our stand on Ukraine with Russia. We did urge that there should be a peaceful resolution there. So is the Middle East as well. And Saudi is a key player in this regard.